How's it going, everybody? My name is Alex Gortney, and welcome to the Developer Soup Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Nick Queen, and today we're going to start talking about a little bit of how we started to get into the specific programming languages that we're in right now, and a little bit of making that choice and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and let Nick Queen kind of take over and explain it a little bit more.
All right, so yeah, as we were talking, before the show, and I think we've talked about several times in the past, and I think this is even a discussion that we had. You were going down, if I remember, you were going down the Android path. I think first you started with 3D. Is that correct? 3D.
Yeah,
Then
3D
you decided,
modeling.
yeah, and then you decided, Android. But you had
Well,
decided that simply you really didn't want really
well,
satisfied, right?
Well, actually, I didn't mention this last time our first podcast, but actually, I originally wanted to go into Python because
Okay.
when I was doing 3D development, I found out you can start making plugins and basic games in Blender's engine, and
Mhm.
that's when that competition. I don't know if I talked about it or not, but I went to that game competition I first did, and we were thinking about trying to do it in Python, and we thought it was pretty neat. And I did touch on a little bit on that game on the second time we went to the competition and made a basic 3D game in there. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing and pretty much slapping other code in, and had to ask like a ton of questions. But that's kind of where that first actually started, was in Python before I moved to everywhere else.
Gotcha. So why didn't? I guess that's a good first place to start. So, what is it about Python? Why did you decide to go away from Python?
It really wasn't that I decided to go away from it. It was that I just never touched back on it after I decided to move into other languages.
Hmm.
Um, but the other thing is, as I started to move in toward Android and was messing around with JavaScript and things like that, I think the biggest thing that came to me when I was running with a more strict type language like Java was Python's lack of syntax. And it just like sometimes it becomes really hard to read, even though you can add it in there. It's just one of those things to where I preferred one syntax over the other. And I
Hmm.
also didn't really understand, still kind of don't, of what Python's really good for, I guess. Like, I understand it has like a ton of capabilities, but it's really a thing of I don't really hear a lot about it.
Sure.
It's more behind the scenes, like, you have to have a reason to use it type of thing. And that's just coming from me being new. So, if someone else knows more about it, then that's great. But that's just me, not really doing as much research into it.
Yeah. Well, I think from what I understand now, of course, both of us are new at this. Python. It's a backend language, but at the same time, it can be used for data analysis. It can be used for just a lot of different things. I actually discovered somebody had mentioned in the Slack channel that I told me the TIOBE index. Have you ever heard of that?
No, what is it?
So it's basically, and I'm going to send this to you, and this is something we can link to in the show notes, I guess. I'll send it to you in chat. It's basically the best way. It's an index of the popularity of programming languages, and the latest one is up for July. The top language right now is Java. Second is C. Then you got C++, C Sharp, and then Python.
I'm
Objective
surprised
C.
that JavaScript's way down there.
Well, JavaScript at 9. Some. I was actually surprised Visual Basic was above it, but it seemed like I never really picked
I'm
much about it.
I'm
So
honestly surprised Java's at the top, just considering that when I was learning Java, that so many people were like, "Well, Java's crap." Well, but the thing is, when you ask them why it was crap, they can never give you a real answer. Like,
sure. Sure. Well, and I think it's everybody has, everybody can be a language snob to some time or another. I was like I said last week. I think I went to the super meetup in Baltimore and ran into somebody that was doing Clojure, and I'd never heard of Clojure before.
mhm.
So it's one of those things. It's like, and if you kind of scroll down, you'll see that everything has surges here and there. So
Yeah,
JavaScript,
yeah, and
it stays pretty steady. And that's what both of us are learning right now. You can see Ruby it looks like it's dropping a little bit, but the highest position it was at, if you click on it, it's number 8. I think the thing that you can see here though is that all of them, they go up and down, and to some degree, there's no real best language. It's what you want to build.
the other thing too is you figure too this chart, from what I'm understanding of it, really only represents like what people are currently using, not really what the job market's wanting type of thing. Because honestly, from what I've seen, you're gonna find some sort of job in pretty much every language you want. From what I've done, I mean that's coming from messing with Python and messing with JavaScript and messing with C++ and messing with Ruby, and jumping around all those languages in Java. There's jobs in almost all of them.
Well, and something that someone else has told me was, pick something. It doesn't matter. You can pick Java, you can pick JavaScript. Pick something.
And it
once
doesn't.
You start picking it up, you can move. Learn one, then it's easier to learn the next one.
Well, yeah, and that's true. Like, one thing I don't suggest people ever do, and I finally understand why people said it for the longest time, was at one point when I was wanting to learn C++. People like, don't jump straight into C++. Learn Python at first. And that's one reason I started picking up Python with Blender as well. But I'm like, all right, so I picked up Python. The reason they say pick up Python at first is because there's no syntax. There's no strict syntax. It's like even more lenient than JavaScript, honestly. And it helps you just gain on the basics, what an if statement is, and logic stuff, other logic and stuff, without having to worry about all the other stuff that higher end languages bring, like C++. But when you go, for instance, when you did what I did, where you go in something like Java, you still go to C++. It's still hard, So, but the thing is, because of me going from that language to C++, it was a little bit easier to understand because a lot of the stuff was similar. But like you were saying, you just need to pick something and go with it, because no matter what, you can create the same thing in pretty much everything in any language you want. It's just going to be on a different platform,
Yeah.
It's like I was saying with my Android stuff, the projects I had lined up for that, I can still create on the web. It's not going to make a difference. And that's one thing I was wondering with Java, was because I wanted to create a game with Java.
Yeah.
But people are like, don't do it. It's terrible. Well, you ask them why, but they won't tell you.
Sure.
They're like, go to C++. And again, it goes back to that thing with, being a language snob and thinking that language is superior. And I think that's where a lot of beginners like us get screwed over, is because when you're looking around, you see these people have been programming for God knows how long, and they pigeonhole themselves into one language. And because of that, they're going to just tell everybody else not to go to the other language, from what I've seen. Or at one point in time, they possibly could have had, a pitfall in the job market, and they don't want other people going in that, because they think it can happen again, So when you're going and seeing this stuff, it could just easily scare you out of it, thinking, oh, well, now there's not a job market because it failed back in 2014, for instance,
Yeah.
And it's just there's so much to it, and that's why I just ignore it all and I just jump into the thing, because otherwise you're just never going to get anywhere. And that's kind of why I just stuck with JavaScript, honestly, for one of the reasons. I mean, after talking to you.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is a good point. At this point, we talked about why we chose what we chose. And you kind of talked about a little bit how you went first to Python, you went into the Android, you wanted to build an app, and then you decided on JavaScript after speaking to me. Maybe at this point, maybe I can kind of go back and just kind of figure out where, tell everybody how I got to where I'm at, and then we can discuss together our discussion a little bit about the JavaScript, and why both of us are right now working on that.
Yeah.
So I started out, I had really no programming knowledge, unless you count back when I was a kid, I was like maybe 8, 9 years old. I got this computer you could hook to a TV. I can't even remember the name of it, and it did BASIC. Do you know what BASIC is? I'm sure.
Yeah, I know what
Yes,
basic is.
yeah. So
It's
you
like an
know,
ancient language, but yes.
yeah. You put print, and then go to 10 or
Was
whatever.
that back in the day where you had well no, you aren't even that old. So
Well,
you wouldn't have would you still well maybe you would. Would you still have the days when the computers had separate IC chip boards on them?
probably at some point. I mean, I remember, at least I remember floppy drives. you
Yeah,
know,
floppy drive. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I like one of the first things I ever had was just like I remember going to a computer store and buying. It had like 8 floppies, and
Well,
it was
yeah.
Panzer, like Panzer General or something. It was like a tank game. I mean, so.
Yeah. Anyway,
Anyways, yeah, yeah. So I was trying to figure out what exactly I was doing. So I was looking at Python because Python does seem to be something everybody wants to kind of throw at you. I was looking online at like computer science, like doing a computer science degree, but like doing it all with online courses. So and one of the first courses they mentioned was the CS50 course from Harvard. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but basically, I think it goes into C++, if I remember correctly, and I might be wrong on that. It doesn't matter. I almost started it, and then I ran across a book called No Degree, No Problem by Joshua Kemp in Amazon. Bought it. Um, read through it, and he had recommended, his path was using Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So, at that point, I made a decision to do it in Python, Ruby on Rails, but everybody was saying just commit. Unfortunately, I go on to Reddit. Reddit has a learn programming subreddit. And you see people come in all the time. Well, I picked up C++, then I did some Java. I went into PHP, then I did some JavaScript, and then some Ruby, and then I went into Python. But I don't know how to program. And it's like, well, you've really never committed it. You know a lot about a little bit of these, all over the place. But going through one language, you're going to learn about all the basics, your loops, your if statements, all of that, and then you can maybe go over and learn something new. So I decided, I'm going to learn Ruby on Rails. So I started just picking up the HTML, CSS because I knew that in the past. I wanted to make sure I had a good base for it. Then I went and started on Michael Hartle's Ruby on Rails tutorial. Decided once I got to like chapter 4, I needed to go and learn just Ruby itself. Because Ruby on Rails is the framework that it runs on, but Ruby is the language. So that's when I went to the Treehouse, went through that track, went back to Ruby on Rails, and at that point, they started talking about a lot of JavaScript. At the same time, I've gotten really interested in Free Code Camp, which was based on like a full stack JavaScript course load. That you learn all of it going down. I think they go through Angular. I think they go through Node.js. I've really looked all the way through. At that point, I decided, you know what? Maybe it's best for me to know JavaScript at the front end, and then go back and build that framework knowledge with Rails. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't feel like I honestly don't feel like I've switched languages, even though JavaScript is its own programming language all by itself. But I feel like knowing JavaScript on top of going back and eventually getting the Rails, Ruby and the Rails framework it would be very beneficial. So I could do back end and front end with it, if I needed to. So
yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at right now. So.
Yeah, and see, I'm more on the lines of sticking with the stuff that JavaScript has, like learning Node.js and AngularJS or Ember for the framework. That one I'm not really sure of yet because I haven't really researched it. But the main thing is just me sticking with JavaScript, honestly, and learning Node.js as my backend. That way I don't, just so I stick with one thing because I want to become proficient in that one thing before I try to branch out to something like Rails, for instance.
Sure.
And that's just me personally. listening to like John Sonmez, if you guys heard his stuff before, like I mentioned in the introduction episode, he talks, and one of the things he talks about is when you choose your language, eventually start niching yourself into that language because you come more what's the word I'm thinking of? You come more valuable to people because you know that one specific thing that other person doesn't, type of thing, because you stuck with it, type of thing. You stuck with it. And that's the biggest thing, is just like you want to go into Rails after you go into JavaScript.
Well, I'm not talking like going through the end. First my goal right now is I'm going to stick with the JavaScript for a while. But eventually I do want to return back, because my goal eventually would be more of the back end than the front end.
And that's me personally too, but that's why I wanted my thing is I want to just stick with Node.js and stick with what I'm familiar with at first.
Sure.
Because there's like a ton of backend systems, so I can go learn PHP. It just, I don't want to do that right now.
Nobody wants to learn PHP.
Actually, that's one thing I actually never mentioned that I did learn how to do as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like I said, I touched all over the place. When I was with a friend that when I mentioned in my introduction, who was going through Full Sail, he let me take the tracks or the courses he was learning, because they were online videos. So I got to take his stuff. But I did learn PHP for a while. I actually learned how to got proficient with the CodeIgniter framework.
Okay.
I mainly did that through like Tuts Plus, NetTuts Plus, or Tuts Plus, NetTuts at the time. But I really got proficient by doing that just by working on that form board I mentioned to you off and on. We were working on like a 6-month project, creating a form board from scratch that was mimicking BB form, the PHP BB forms frame thing that you can implement into your websites. You ever heard of that?
I think I've heard of it, but I really have not really.
Yeah, we wanted to do our own thing because the BB forms or something, they were kind of too default.
BB forms, yeah, okay.
Yeah, they were too default for us, and we wanted to do our own thing. So we created our own, and that was just a nightmare. But the thing is, like, while I mess with PHP, like, I mainly here's the other thing too, is when you learn a language, when you first start to learn a program, you want to do everything from scratch. I mean, that's just me, and I mean some other people I talked to that I met. They want to do everything from scratch, and they want to learn everything that one thing does. And I was that way with PHP, and then it's funny because you go from learning stuff from scratch, and then you learn a framework, and then you don't know how to do anything from scratch anymore unless you need to, So, and I think that's one thing too that you got to keep in mind when going over tutorials and stuff and picking your language is, what's out there as far as frameworks goes. And and if there's not, how easy is your language going to be to do from scratch? Because PHP, setting up a network and making sure everything connects and, doing all that stuff, as it grows, it can be really huge. That's why it's good to, to do it through that. But it's for another time though. But I mean, that's just choosing that. And that's why I just stuck with what I'm doing now. I mean, and don't want to go back to it. I want to learn something else that's new, and maybe one day I can learn it again, but.
Yeah, well, and I mean, from what I understand, honestly, at least from people, and that I think that could probably be the point of this, is everybody has an opinion. You hear PHP is on its way out. I remember PHP was one of the first web languages that I ever really heard about.
I heard of Cold Fusion first before I heard of PHP.
Yeah,
but I
honestly, I'm not even sure. PHP, for some reason, I just remember when it became popular. All of a sudden everything was PHP. And it's actually a cool history if you actually go back and read about, how it was created and stuff. I think the guy almost made it by accident, if I remember correctly. Like he was just trying to do some cool stuff on his, on his own, and all of a sudden, he starts writing this language. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like you said, though, there's just multiple opinions, and like I said, I've gone
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of different languages and just really sticking with one of them. Like I said, I'm just now stuck with one. So you're going to hop around at first till you find one you just it clicks.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's just how it's gonna go. I mean, overall.
Mm-hmm.
But so, just since we're kind of gonna have to start wrapping things up here, what kind of advice do you have though for looking for a language, in your opinion?
I, I mean, my thing is, you probably want to look at first off, you want to, what do you want to do? So if you're going to do, in the end, if you want to do back end, look at what's in the back end. You could do I almost said PHP, Python and Django. You could do Ruby, Rails. You could do JavaScript, Node.js. The reason right now I decided on JavaScript is honestly it runs in the browser. There's a lot of resources out there that you can learn off of, and everybody is going to have access to it. I mean, you write it. You don't have to start a server like Ruby and Rails. People out there who know probably what I'm talking about. You've got to start your server up for Ruby on Rails, and you've got to, there's just a lot of stuff to do. JavaScript, it's kind of, you type it up and you hit, run your page, and it works or it doesn't work. Go into the JavaScript console in Chrome. To me, I like it just because it's ease of use.
Yeah, well, I also like JavaScript for its fact that it's a giant sandbox.
It is. It's fun. I think that's the fun. I think that's and kind of what you need to have fun doing what you're doing. If you're not having fun, if it's frustrating to the point, I mean, yeah, number one, we get that's frustrating is going to happen. I mean, this past week I became so frustrated. I put a piece of code outside of a for loop, and it just would not run. And and I looked at it, I read it up, down, squinted at it. I walked away for a little. It would not work. And then finally, I saw it, and that was kind of that aha moment. And move it up one line inside of uh, moved it inside, and it ran, and it's just but you're going to get frustrated, but at the same time, you've got to enjoy it. I liked Ruby when I did it, and like I said, I still go back because I liked the way it read. It was a very elegant language. JavaScript makes sense. I don't know if I could do a Python from what your description is now. Kind of curious just to look at it because to me that sounds like hell. I don't know if I would like the way, at least the way you're describing it. It doesn't sound like it would speak to me. I guess. I don't know.
I don't know.
So,
It's just hard to read when you have like hundreds of lines of code at first.
yeah,
I mean, obviously
you get used to stuff.
do it.
But,
yeah, you get used to it. I mean,
yeah.
but I mean, overall, I personally like JavaScript. I suggest if you guys are looking for a language to start with, you start with JavaScript at first or Python because it'll be easy to pick up. And then if you want to go from there, I would move into the more strict type languages like Java or C++ or C# and so forth, depending on what you want to do from there. Just for ease of use purposes, because it'll make so much more sense, especially when you start learning what objects are and how to do all that. And then, for instance, especially if you get into Java and things like C++, because it gets a lot more complicated than it does in JavaScript, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the other side of this is, if you want to learn, Android, I think Android is Android is Java, right?
Yeah. It's a frame, technically a framework or an API including the Java. If you're going to go learn Android, though, be prepared for a very steep learning curve.
Mm-hmm. But if you're going to learn, if you want to develop for an iPhone, you need to learn Swift. If you want to do the web, so you also want to pick based on what you want to do. So where do you pick for yourself? There's a language. You want to pick the right tool. That's the other thing. So that would be the other research you want to do. So if your dream is to make the next Facebook, God bless you. But you're gonna want to pick the right tool. Ruby is something that I've read is something that's very quick to develop in. Startups pick it because of that. You pick it, you build the page in it, it builds up quickly, and then you could maybe move on, later on down the line to something a little more robust. Because then you start hearing people say, "Oh, it can't scale, whatever." Uh, you know, that's what happened with Twitter. Twitter was built in Ruby. So if you want, if just you want to pick something that you're going to want to, that is going to get you where you want to go, is kind of what I'm saying. So,
Yeah, just essentially choose what you like and make it geared toward what you eventually want to do as your end goal, and then choose the languages that are geared toward that. And essentially, when you do, just look at the syntax, look if it makes sense to you, and then when you do that, just stick with it and don't jump ship unless you absolutely need to.
And the last thing I would say, so we can, before we wrap up, if you go to places like let me look in here. I think Code School has something that's a try Ruby course. I think they have try Ruby, try Python. If you look out there, there are places where you can get like a taste of these. So, treat it like it's it's an hors d'oeuvre.
As much as we don't, as much as we don't like it, the best place to actually just try and see syntax would be Code Academy.
Yeah, I mean, and as much as I joke all the time, Code Academy it's out there, it's free. Some people might not like it, and we'll talk about that more in the next episode. I have a different learning style than you do, Alex. But I am also looking real quick at Code School. Code School also has it. So, like for JavaScript, it has the first course is free. It's an introduction to the basics of it. If you go to Ruby, and it's the first one is free. Try Ruby, and I think they've got the same thing with iOS. Try iOS is not free.
Yeah, well, either way, just find a way to try them out. I mean, that's honestly all you got to do is look on whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, their level 1 is free, and it's looks like it's comic book based. So, so just go out there, you'll find what you want to try, and
that's why I think Treehouse. That's why I think Treehouse is amazing for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's going to go into our our next episode of resources and stuff.
So all right. Well, I think our last thing probably what's your goals for the week?
Yeah. So my goals for the end of the week for this week would be to finish up the track I'm on currently with jQuery and get through that, and then I want to start working on a basic quiz application, and then just I can refine what I learned in jQuery, and then move on from there.
All right, cool. And my goal actually is I'm going to be a little more. I'm off on vacation this coming week. Supposedly in the full stack JavaScript thing, I have 11 hours left. My goal is I'm wanting to complete this whole thing, which I think I can do. And then I also want to start building a page. So I'm going to probably move my blog inside of a page that I build. So I'll have a link to it. So I'll move it inside. And I want to build a portfolio type page so I can, show people, what I've learned.
Yeah.
And then that way I can add apps and stuff onto it. I think that would be the first good goal.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was gonna say is I forgot to mention that I'm doing a rebranding of my website.
Okay, cool.
Because I got a new theme for it, so that's another thing I was gonna say I gotta put up there.
So I mean, once again, I've talked to you about this. Kitties are not good for I don't think it's very professional. Kitten, gifts and stuff like that. It's just not the way to go. You're
do what?
I'm sorry.
That went over my head. Sorry.
No, I was saying you're adding kittens to your website. That's your new thing.
Oh yeah. It's what it's gonna be full of. It's just gonna be full of random people on MySpace. But anyway,
like a kitten trailing like a mouse trail with kittens on.
Well, when me and my friend designed our blog or our form board, our mock-up had pictures of like Selena Gomez and like Tom.
Oh wow, yeah.
Just-
I miss Tom. And now I kind of wonder what happened with Tom.
he
Yeah,
died.
he was my friend at one point.
He was everybody's
He
friend.
was everybody's friend. So, all right. Well, we should wrap this up before
Yeah.
it gets out of control.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, guys, join in next week, and we're gonna be going over our resources of where we've been learning this stuff, and going over our best places, and then where you guys can also find extra resources that you might like to go check out yourselves.
And
But
if
anyway-
there's resources you like out there, email them to us and we can add them onto the show and just look at them. Throw them
Yeah,
out to
definitely.
people.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, guys, that was the end of the episode. My name is Alex Gortney, and that
And
is Nick. Go
Right.
ahead and introduce
We need
yourself.
We need to get more coordinated with this. Yeah, my name's Nick Quinn.
Yeah, and we will be talking to you guys later. Bye.
See ya.